Hello, my friends. I have a wonderful gift for you today. My friend Lawrence Gold thinks a little bit differently about things. His approach to stress, because that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is going to be different. And perhaps it's going to make possible for you some different ways to manage and approach your life. I met Lawrence in an event that we were in, and he intrigued me, and I look forward to allowing him to intrigue you. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you, Sandra. So it goes without saying that we live in times that are stress provoking in spades, worldwide, that is planetary level crises, political upheaval, and changes in our human civilization on many fronts. And so, with all that change, people are experiencing a degree of stress that I have called being in a sea, SEA, of stress, without even knowing they're in a sea of stress because they're so used to it, they think that's just the way things are. They label it in their minds reality. It's not reality, it's a reflection of their own ways of responding or reacting to conditions. So, in a certain way, we're kind of like a musical instrument, and life is like the player of that instrument. And if we were a harp, our strings would be being plucked by all the different circumstances that cause us to respond, to resonate in a certain way, which is a matter of our accustomed ways of responding to everything in life. Let me name a few of the simple, common circumstances that prompt people's stress reaction. Information overload, too much to do, and I'll say it bluntly, bad conditioning. Here's where the bad conditioning comes in. People, particularly in the West, are trained to alleviate stress by changing circumstances. That's doing it the hard way. Think of how difficult it is even to get someone to change their own mind. So people are pursuing happiness. They're pursuing the relief from stress by trying to change circumstances. That might mean working harder, working faster, or working smarter. The title of our podcast today is Freedom of Intelligence. So you can guess I'm going to be talking about working smarter. Now, working smarter isn't a matter of knowing all kinds of things about your circumstance and applying what you know in intelligent or clever ways. That's back to trying to change circumstances. I recommend and advocate a completely different approach, which is to change our own conditioning. Now, that's something that's typically regarded as very difficult to do. However, I made what I consider a fundamental discovery some years ago, that intelligence consists of 4 basic functions or muscles of intelligence, which are attention, intention, memory, and imagination. Those 4 work together as a singularity. It's not like one or the other. They are all operating simultaneously. So in any moment when you're perceiving a situation, you're making sense of it according to your memory. You're harboring expectations of how things will turn out by the combination of memory and imagination. And you know all that by putting your attention on it. If you don't have your attention on it, you can't perceive any of that stuff. And the typical approach is to exercise intention. Well, we have a little bit of a problem here, and it's evident in the popular vernacular. Expressions like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Attention deficit disorder. Memory loss or unreliable memory, that ties in with information overload. People can't handle so much input. So we have those faculties of intelligence, but they're typically unevenly developed in us. Primarily, I think, because of our educational system, which emphasizes remembering things as the sign of success and approval, instead of all four. And yet none of those four works without all of them working together. So people are working at a disadvantage.
I'd like to interrupt you, Lawrence. I'm going to have you repeat the four again so that I can write
Yes.
them down.
All right.
Attention, intention, and what are the other two
Memory,
so that I can write them down in the notes?
memory, and imagination.
Okay, go on.
Okay. So I say people are working at a disadvantage because we typically are out of balance among those four, with memory being heavy. When memory is heavy, it drowns out imagination, which is exactly what we need for problem solving. When intention dominates over attention, people become out of control even by themselves. Their actions are inaccurate because they're not perceiving clearly, because attention has been drowned out by their preset intention. You're getting the hang of what I'm saying here? These are problems that are built into our civilization, and they hobble our intelligence. So what we're talking about today here is a way of integrating and balancing those four muscles of intelligence: attention, intention, memory, and imagination. When that happens, stress evaporates. It evaporates on the spot as those four come into balance, without having to change anything about the situation first. That's what I'm talking about. Now, there happens to be a procedure, well structured and very reliable, that I'll be presenting later in our session today. It's called the gold key release. And what does it do? It awakens, integrates, and balances the four muscles of intelligence, leading to the ability to release stress at will, at first by applying the gold key release until you get familiar with the internal shift that occurs, that you can do it just by an act of intention in yourself.
So you're saying, Lawrence, I think, that if I notice myself having this experience of stress or whatever, that there are practical steps that I can take to be able to balance these muscles of intelligence and feel better. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Exactly.
And you're going to tell us how to get started in that process.
Exactly.
Thank you. So
Now here's
I guess
go
I
ahead.
want to know, like, because I'm eager. It's like, oh, I need this. So what is the first thing that I pay attention to when I'm noticing that I'm experiencing stress?
The first thing to pay attention to is the stress feeling itself. And in fact, that's the very first step of the gold key release. Notice what's bothering you. And then, for the purpose of handling it, give it a very brief name, a couple of syllables or so, that you can use to refer back to that feeling as we go through the gold key release. So the first step, Sandra, is to notice what's bothering us and to give it a name.
Really good. That's something that I have people do as well. So
Mm-hmm.
if they've gotten to that point and they've paused, because that's what it takes, right? Pausing,
Right.
and then giving it attention. Like we said, that's the first of our
Mm-hmm.
muscles of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And then I give it a name. So what's next?
Well, first, to tie things, when you give it a name, you make it easy to remember it to yourself. So we've covered attention and memory just in that very first step. Now, once that's done, the gold key release takes a person through a series of steps in which they contact the sensation of that stress vividly, then get in touch with refusing it, resisting it, or intending it and working with it. Neither of those is the solution, by the way. They're just a way of getting a handle on our own conditioning. So we notice our resistance to it, and we notice our intention about it. Then we
So
look
tell
at
me,
the,
so tell
go
me a
ahead.
little bit more, okay? Because I want
Mhm.
people to really get this as we're walking through it, okay? So I'm aware that I'm experiencing this. I've named it. Tell me more about how I might experience it. What are the different things I might feel? What are the different things I might notice in that next step?
Okay. Well, it's as familiar as our ordinary experience of stress, such as what just happened behind us. Okay, so what a person does is notice how much they're caught in the situation. That's done by certain steps in the gold key release. Then contact the sense of whether it's really true or it's not true.
So, what sorts of things might people notice about that intensity? Because this is really important information for you watching,
Right,
right? Getting these steps is what's going to make the difference in your daily life. So you want to know what Lawrence is saying here.
right. And it's the most ordinary experience by which we recognize stress. It could be tightening in the belly, it could be a stiffening of the spine, it could be the rise of an emotion like anger, sorrow, or fear. In the long term, it could be the appearance of stress headaches. But in the moment is just feeling uptight, feeling tensed in the midst of the situation. Like when that screen fell over behind, I could have gone bananas if I were somebody else. I wouldn't have had the resiliency to retain my humor in the midst of what could be a rather embarrassing moment. Notice how much it bothers me. Not terribly, right? It'd be better if it hadn't happened, but okay, here we are. The most common experiences of stress that people notice when they're feeling overwhelmed: anger, sorrow, fear, bodily tensions, shallow breathing, the voice losing its resonance. As a person gets tense in the neck, the voice might tend to get hollow sounding. When a person's relaxed, the voice is resonant. Now, these are all the external manifestations of internal states, the bodily expressions of a person's psychology happening. But in circumstances, the person might find it difficult to absorb information, difficult to formulate solutions, difficulty making decisions, dread, host of symptoms.
Yes. So, for you in the audience, listening now or listening to the recording, think about how often do you experience these signs that Lawrence is describing? Oh my goodness, it happens all of the time. Now he's helping you find ways to get a different path out of that box, the way I describe it. Get to a different end point than maybe you have in the past. So keep going with the wisdom, Lawrence.
Okay. So once a person has identified how caught, how entangled they feel in the situation, how trapped they feel by it, the next step is to notice how true we feel it really is. And we do that by inspecting the feelings of being true or untrue. Then we tie that into memory. We remember those feelings. Once we've done that, we're in a place having sensed that stress reaction in ourselves clearly enough to notice that it's not something that's happening to us, it's something that we're actually doing. It's an attitudinal set, it's a frame of mind that we, by habit, resort to whenever something happens. Like some people get really um, upset and urgent to correct a problem. Others might deny the problem. Others might try to change the objects of our attention, to take a break, to escape. All manner of stress reduction that has to do with, let's say, alcohol, food, sex, money, all the distractions by which people avoid experiencing the condition that's prompting the stress in them. Once a person has identified that feeling of holding to that tension pattern, they're in a position simply to release it, not before. It can't be done as a mental effort. It has to be the recognition that a person is tensing themselves. Now, the virtue of this approach is that it enables a person to get a look at that without any kind of symbolic interpretation, without any guesswork, and without even feeling like they are losing anything or giving in by releasing their reaction to it. It's not an approach of opposition or counteraction to the stressful situation.
So, what
It's
I hear
not,
you saying, Lawrence,
yes,
is that these behaviors, these compensation mechanisms, or, things that people do that they don't necessarily like, that these are a natural way of responding to the stress that you're in. And
it's a,
that Lawrence is helping us find a different path, a different way to respond to those stressful situations that's maybe more empowering. Yes?
it's the easy way.
Yes. So continue, Lawrence.
Okay. So that summarizes the steps we're going into through the gold key release. They involve all four of those muscles of intelligence. We put our attention on the thing that's troubling us. We contact our feeling of intention about it. We notice that we're holding all of that in memory. And at that point, we pivot and turn to imagination. Now, imagination is, I think, not what most people think it is. They think that imagination is always or can be something that's familiar to us. You imagine something like Donald Duck, for example. But that's remembering. It's something that you already knew before you imagined it. Whereas true imagination is the emergence of something completely new from the unknown. In fact, it isn't even noticed as something we're imagining until it goes into short-term memory so that we can pay attention to it. Now, all these words can get us a little tied up in our minds. Fortunately, it's not necessary to know all this stuff to do the gold key release. It's much simpler and much more direct. What I've done just now is give you something of an explanation so that when you get into a stressful situation and you notice that your tendency is to work harder to power your way through the stressful situation, that's the old way. It's a way of attempting to oppose our reaction to the situation without releasing our reaction to the situation to the point where it loses its force in us. It's an attempt to control the situation rather than to dissolve the situation. This is the big difference. We don't oppose, we dissolve the grip that we feel we're in. That leads to a feeling of freedom, ease, relaxation, and intelligence can then rise to the occasion so that we can function at a much higher level than if we just suppress, deny, avoid, or substitute for our stressful situation. That makes sense? That come through?
Yes. So I think what you're saying, and I want us to get to this now, is that part of the path out is imagining something different from what I normally imagine. Is that what you're saying?
That's the usual approach. That's the old approach. That's what everybody's trying to do from
Oh,
all of the instruction they've had from everybody else in the world who's an expert on stress. It doesn't work. You
okay.
can't imagine the alternative because the intensity of the situation is so dominant that it drowns out the imagination.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited now to hear from you what it is that we do imagine.
Well, that's completely unique to the situation. Once you've freed yourself from the grip of the stressful situation, your imagination is felt as a space in you, an absence of mental content, a resting point, so that when you go back into the situation that you've addressed in a particular application of the gold key release, the situation of stress you've addressed, As soon as you encounter it again, your responses are spontaneously different and better because you've released the conditioning that kept you feeling trapped by the situation. This is called thinking outside the box. It's not a matter of effort. It's spontaneous when we clear up the conditioning that keeps us feeling stuck and entangled in the stressful situation. Now, anything more than that in terms of explanation would probably just muddy the waters. The best approach is to get a direct experience of what I've been talking about.
Yes. So that's a good idea. Before we do the gold key release, I want you to tell people how they can connect with you, because after he does this process, we're going to end the video so that you can just stay in the space that he creates for you with this process. So, Lawrence, tell people how they can connect with you and if you've got something for them.
Okay, well, we do have something for you. It's going to be posted as a link associated with this video. If you click the link, two things. You can get a free downloadable version of the Gold Key Release app, for your use whenever you need it. And you'll get a way that you can contact me directly. So we'll have those as clickable links.
That sounds perfect. So before we do the gold key release, is there a last thought you want to leave people with, a point that you want them to take away from this experience?
Only that they don't need to feel trapped or stuck in situations that bother them. They will now have a way that in a few minutes they can free themselves from the grip, from the entrapment in stress-inducing situations. This is the easy way.
That is so amazing. All right, so I'm ready to do the gold key release.
Okay, so what we're going to do is a run through of the gold key release in which I've chosen the item that we'll use in the gold key release. And the item is going to be big changes, because that's what's facing us, not just immediately, but in the foreseeable future. So whatever comes up in the process of the gold key release, you don't evaluate it for correctness, and you don't dig any deeper to get more of it. You simply take what you get at each step. The words of the gold key release will stir certain things up in you so that you can see them about yourself. And as we go through each of those steps, you will feel a series of releases culminating with the final result of the process, which consists of a good result being the item has dissolved so thoroughly that you have trouble remembering what it was. Now, we have time constraints in this podcast, so one pass through may or may not do it, in which case a couple of more runs through generally accomplish it. Usually 1 to 3 on a given item. So it's going to be like this. I'm going to be stating steps. You let the words stir things in you, feel them, and then relax and wait for the next step. Next step will stir the next thing. Feel it and relax. Ready? We begin.
You can go through it twice. How about that? Go through it twice.
Okay. Big changes, big changes. Feeling, big changes, big changes. Notice where you feel it in you, big changes. Listen, listen. Feel the intensity of its intensity. Big changes. Feel the intensity of identifying big changes. Intending big changes. Intending big changes. Intending refusing. Refusing. Refusing big changes. Refusing big changes. Big changes. Big changes. It matters. Big changes. Big changes don't matter. They don't matter. Big changes. They matter. Feel how mattering involves you. Feel how mattering involves others. It's true. It's true. Untrue. 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 It's true. Untrue. Untrue. It's true. It's true. Remembering. Remembering. It's true. It's true. Remembering. Remembering big changes. It's true. Remembering. Remembering. Untrue. Untrue. Remembering. Remembering big changes. Untrue. Remembering big changes. It's true. Remembering big changes. Untrue. Allow how remembering involves imagining. Stop imagining. Let it dissipate and dissolve. Awaken. Is it more, less, the same, or gone? If it's gone, you're done. Otherwise, take what's left. Feel having it. Notice where you feel it in you. Big changes. Listen. Listen. Feel the intensity of its intensity. Big changes. Feel the intensity of identifying big changes. Refusing big changes. Refusing big changes. Refusing intending. Intending. Intending big changes. Intending big changes. Big changes. Big changes don't matter. Big changes. Big changes matter. They matter. Big changes don't matter. Feel how it not mattering involves you. Feel how it not mattering involves others. Untrue. Untrue. It's true. It's true. It's true. Untrue. It's true. It's true. Untrue. Untrue. Allow how remembering involves imagining. 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 Intending. Imagining. Imagining big changes. Big changes. Intending. Imagining. Intending. Intending. Big changes. Big changes. Big changes. Imagining. Imagining. Remembering. Imagining. Imagining big changes. Big changes. Remembering. Imagining. Remembering. Remembering. Big changes. Big changes. Big changes. Imagining. Imagining. Attending. Imagining. Imagining big changes. Big changes. Attending. Imagining. Attending. Attending. Big changes. Big changes. Big changes. Imagining. Imagining. Imagining big changes. Big changes. Big changes. Stop imagining. Stop stopping. Is it more, less, the same, or gone? If it's gone, you're done. Otherwise, you do more cycles of the gold key release until it is so gone that it's like smoke. Impossible to grasp, difficult to remember. So that's
Thank
the
you.
gold key release.
That was wonderful. So, you watching, thank you, and connect with Lawrence. Thank you.